For the last 6 months, we've been taking a deep dive into the issue of spiking. You might have experienced it yourself, or maybe it's happened to someone you know. People are being targeted in social situations, their drinks laced with drugs or alcohol without them having any idea, and certainly without consent. Through our Spiked investigation, we found it's more common and more dangerous than you think. The effects can be devastating, the consequences long-lasting, and the day it happens to you can feel like any other day.
We had prees at ours, and then as soon as we got to the club, it was 2 for 1, and I had like one in each hand. I couldn't remember anything as to what happened after that point. I just woke up the following day really confused as to where I was, what was going on.
They had one of those high card limits at the bar, so I had to buy 3 drinks rather than just one for myself. So I bought 2 for my mates, and I passed them back, and then I took 1 sip of that drink, and after that point I don't remember anything.
I was running around like an absolute maniac around this club. I was panicking. My eyes were apparently really big. Throughout the night, I was convinced that I'd only been there for half an hour. I was there for 6 hours and I didn't even know.
My sister couldn't find me anywhere. The only place that she wasn't able to check was the boys' toilet. And so my sister just went into the toilets. Apparently I opened it, at which point I'd already sustained all my physical injuries because I was covered in blood. And I think I was like incoherent.
I think it's really, really scary. I could have woken up in a ditch. I could have woken up in a random person's bed. I don't know. Anything could have happened and I would have had no recollection of it.
I'd split my chin. Well, I later found out I'd fractured my wrist, but I knew that my wrist really hurt and I was bleeding from my nose. My first point of call was to go to A&E. At this point, it kind of hadn't really set in that maybe something more sinister had happened.
It's really terrifying, the fact that someone wanted to put something in my drink to make me completely powerless, in a sense that I couldn't speak, I could barely sort of move in a normal way. My body was clearly panicking.
Was I sexually assaulted? Was I sexually harassed? I still don't know. One of the first questions that the nurse asked me was, do I think I've been raped? I think that was the only point where I started crying, because I was like, I actually genuinely don't know.
Maya and Kate are sharing their stories with us to open up the conversation about spiking, and they're demanding something's done about it. 43% of women have been spiked or know someone who has. It's also happened to 1 in every 16 men. Yet many people we've spoken to said they felt powerless or didn't know where to turn when it happened to them. Many were just left picking up the pieces on their own.
I went to go and speak to my sister who was with me the night before, and she said, what happened last night? And I was like, well, I was going to ask you the same thing.
I just woke up the following day really confused as to where I was, what was going on, and I found out from other people essentially what happened. I had to be filled in on my own night. I couldn't even remember what happened.
The first thing that I did was kind of blame myself in a way. I was like, well, something must have happened. I must have done this. And I think now looking back on it, it was kind of a way of taking back control because I was probably quite frightened.
I've never had that where I've completely blacked out as to what's happened. At that point, I realised it started to fill in the blanks that something had happened and that this wasn't right. That following day, when I woke up, I actually had a doctor's appointment anyway, and she said, your pupils really dilated, you're showing signs that you've either got a huge amount of ketamine or Rohypnol. And I think the worst part was that at that point, I kind of didn't want to believe that this had happened.
My mum ended up contacting the venue to view the CCTV. Finally, they responded and they let her go there. I didn't want to go because I think at that point it was a bit too raw for me. I didn't want to see any of that night or repeat it. You know, one of the most critical cameras for any business, I suppose, in many different ways, especially in the nightlife industry, is the one that's behind the bar. That would have been where we would have been able to see when my drink was spiked and who by. That camera was unfortunately blocked by fairy lights.
Last year, police dealt with around 5,000 cases of spiking, but our investigations found out that really that is just the tip of the iceberg. Only around 1 in every 10 spikings are ever reported to the police, with victims often not knowing where to turn or just lacking faith in the justice system. Some didn't want to relive their experiences, while others even reported feeling a sense of embarrassment about what had happened to them.
I was actually quite traumatised. I kind of thought it would be like an isolated incident. I wanted to keep it to myself because I didn't want to sort of like replay it.
Just 2 months before I got spiked, my sister had been spiked. So I knew the process of like going to A&E and getting tested and like what they needed from you. So I knew that was kind of out of the question. So I kind of had my physical injuries treated and then I left, and I had no follow-up support or anything.
It's scary knowing that I was in a position to be potentially that victim. Was it something I was wearing? Was it something I was doing? Am I getting targeted because I'm a woman? It's almost like, what can I do? How can I prevent this from happening in the future? I can't. You don't get to choose.
No one saw anything from what I know. No one helped. You know, even security at the club, like even my sister carried me out of the venue. My sister's younger than me. Not once did someone stop her to help or security get involved. So to this day, I still feel like it was not managed in the best way. You know, the incident happened that it shouldn't have happened, but it should have been managed better afterwards, I believe.
I know countless women who have suffered this kind of thing before, but they won't take it any further because they don't want to have to deal with all the questions of, well, actually, were you doing this? Were you doing that? And it just feels a bit like the blame game.
I still got a scar on my chin from the night I got spiked. I see that every day. I could get quite angry when I thought about it because I thought that person that did that to me is just probably just going about their life in a normal way and I'm having to suffer with these injuries.
You're going to have people who are going to go, oh, well, actually, maybe you should have done this, you should have done that. At the end of the day, it's like someone's story is someone's story. Like, that's what happened to them. And you can say what you like, but you can't change the facts in terms of this is what happened. It wasn't their fault and they suffered as a result.
Our investigation has heard countless stories from spiking victims, each story different, but in each case, there's that sense of not knowing the truth about what happened to them and why.
It's a cowardly crime. It's filthy, isn't it? It's just not nice crime. And the more that people think that way, I think will be better. So let's try and make the perpetrators look at themselves.
Dawn has been campaigning to raise awareness of spiking for 2 decades. Over that time, she's heard thousands of stories about people being spiked in loads of different ways, some ending with the victims being sexually assaulted or even raped. She's only too aware of the issues that come with reporting spiking, a warning that you might find parts of this discussion upsetting.
Why are people not reporting it? Why are people getting away with it? And when we actually delve deep into it, it's because they got no memory of what's happened to them. How can you report a crime that you don't even know has happened? You might know that somebody's had sex with you, but you don't know where, who it was, what happened to you, because these disgusting drugs leave you with no memory whatsoever. You become compliant. You can't put up a fight. And, you know, some of the people that I've spoken to, I just can't tell you. You know, we had a lady recently who said that the drugs had such an effect on her, she couldn't even open her eyes to see who was raping her. You know, what is going on?
It's worth saying at this point, spiking doesn't only take place in bars and nightclubs, but stats seen by the Spiked investigation show 93% of incidents do happen in places that are associated with the nighttime economy. We've also heard reports of it at house parties and at festivals. Dawn also says it doesn't just happen to young people.
We've got business women that contact me. I had a friend who's a male who's 62 years old who got spiked recently, thought he was going to die. My friend's dad, who's 89 years old, got spiked at a wedding through a cupcake. So spiking is happening to all different forms and classes of society.
So here's a question. If we know people are being spiked and we know people aren't reporting it, what do we know about the people who are actually doing it? Where and who are the perpetrators?
We have an understanding to some extent of the scale of the problem in terms of victimisation, but we don't have that understanding at all in terms of understanding offenders.
Nicole Westmoreland is a professor of criminology at Durham Uni, criminal psychologist and a leading voice on the issue of violence and abuse. She's told us that so few cases end up in court, it's hard to build a true picture of what a typical offender looks and acts like. Studies from the US suggest they're often male and target people as a prank, but the conclusions are too broad to draw comparisons with the UK spiking scene. Again, we need to know more about the scale of the issue.
Even if we weren't getting the convictions through, even if we were just identifying the suspects, that would actually be a step forward in terms of understanding the motivations.
And all the while, people, mainly women, are facing the consequences of these offenders' actions. They don't feel confident turning to the police and are left to deal with the mental health impacts of what's happened to them.
I've spoken to victims who have been really worried about going out again. They feel like they'll never be safe. All of their friends will go to one particular club where the incident happened, and they feel unsafe and have panic attacks even walking past that pub during the day. People see that the police and the criminal justice system are struggling anyway with very serious sexual crimes against women and think, what is the point of me reporting this to the police?
So let's look at solutions. There are lots of them out there, with victims, campaigners and authorities all calling for a cohesive strategy to pull them all together. As we speak, a government report on how they're going to tackle spiking is months overdue. Some want to see better CCTV in bars and clubs, combined with testing that detects drugs in the system. Others also want to see a greater emphasis on targeting the perpetrators. While many argue it's time to make spiking itself a specific offence.
This is a serious issue we're dealing with. It's an issue that's underreported, significantly underreported. And the reality is, unless we start changing behaviour of individuals committing this offence, the reality is, unfortunately, we're going to see far too many more victims in the future as well.
Jason Harwin is just retired from the police. He was the National Police Chief's council lead on alcohol-related crimes. He's told Our Spiked investigation it's change that's needed to tackle this head-on.
Firstly, there's no set offence for spiking. There's a number of very old legislation that spiking offences can fit into, but it's not just one offence. So straight away, depending on how it's recording in individual forces, is if we can actually identify a pattern, a series. And again, as we recognise here, those that commit these horrific offences don't just stop in one location. They could be moving about the country, and straight away we miss an opportunity to potentially identify a series of offences. The second part was underreported. The reality here is lots of people are spiked, don't realise they've been spiked, or have no trust in reporting to the police that they've been spiked. And the third part, ultimately from our side again, is the responsibility of the licensed premises. Majority are very responsible and do everything they can to make sure there's such offences not occurring on their premises. But the reality is some felt very concerned that actually could put a reputational issue to their premises, and therefore people will not attend that premises as well. So straight away there was issues around, can we actually identify offences? Actually, can we then identify those responsible? All the way through to the fact is we need more people to report it. And if they report it, gives us a best opportunity to catch those responsible as well.
Well, earlier this year, the government rejected the opportunity to make spiking a specific offence, saying the police already had all the powers they needed to bring offenders to justice. The leader of the Labour Party, Sir Keir Starmer, says that's not good enough, and that using a law from all the way back in 1861 is no longer fit for purpose in the 21st century.
I'm very concerned about this, which is why we, the Labour Party, have announced that if we come into government, we will make spiking a specific criminal offence. I think that will help people coming forward, because I think not that many people are coming forward, and lead to more prosecutions, because it is very often used as a gateway to sexual assault. This is a modern version of an offence against women and girls, and we need to tackle it head on. We've got an action plan. We want to put it into action as an incoming Labour government, make it a specific offence and deal with what is yet another example of violence against women and girls.
In a statement, the government's told us spiking is a cowardly act which is already illegal, and something this government takes very seriously, with offenders facing up to 10 years behind bars if they're convicted. So we asked the Justice Minister what more the government is prepared to do to end the spiking epidemic. This is what he told us.
So this is a hugely concerning issue. I'm an East Midlands MP, and I know that particularly students at the University of Nottingham have been highlighting this, as have people across the country. There are currently criminal offences in place that would catch this. I know there are campaigns to look at this more broadly, and I know that those campaigns are being reflected on very carefully. The challenge we often face with this is almost less the statute law and the criminal law. It's how do you actually get the evidence to prove the offence? How does someone know they've been spiked, and then how do you track down the perpetrator? Because they may only realise sometime later, and therefore there are challenges with how we actually prosecute this. But I know it's a hugely important issue, and it's rightly something we're looking at very carefully.
Campaigners, though, are telling us until more action is taken, we can expect to see more people being targeted by spiking. In towns, villages and cities up and down the country, more people facing those devastating consequences, and more people dealing with the physical, mental and social repercussions.
Women are either made to feel like it's their fault or they're sort of blamed for being the victim, and it should really be a case of people, I guess, who actually have power to make change, to be able to be in a position where they come up with solutions.
It doesn't need me to spell out how important this is. It just needs the powers above to start working out how they're going to update the law to make sure that the perpetrators of this crime are in full facts of what's going to happen to them.
We need people to report it. I understand why people may not report it. They may feel that they're going to get judged. We're not here to judge. You're a victim of crime. We're here to protect you, protect future victims as well. By you reporting it, it gives us a chance to catch those responsible.
There was a bit of a flash in the pan moment with spiking where they said that they were going to take things more seriously, but it would be good to see longevity in that, because currently it's kind of like a forgotten issue once again.
If you've been impacted by spiking, there are links to support services on the Spiked pages of our website. Spiked was written and produced by Mick Coyle. It was presented by Aileen O'Sullivan for Bauer Media Audio.